got to write the perhaps in there. Because later on he says, don't expect too much mercy back in reality. And the same thing about being a peacemaker. You can only be a peacemaker if you have the capacity to be the trouble causer. If you don't have the trouble to be the capacity to be the trouble causer, you don't have a lot of capacity to be the peacemaker, because you don't have enough power there to make the peace. Why is the United Nations just totally useless? Because it doesn't have the power to do any of the things it wants to do. It gets blocked all the time. So how can they be peacemakers? All they do is go into a territory and watch what goes on. Do they bring any peace? Of course not. They call themselves peacemakers, but until you have power, you can't provide peace. So again, he's saying to these young men, you need that power, but express it in a way that brings peace. We could go on and on and on through this. We see so many things. He talks about lots and lots of more bits and pieces, but there are some really beautiful passages tied up. One of them I want to share with you from personal experience. A few years ago, in the church I was working in, we were having no end of hassles. And I won't begin to describe what they were or why they happened, but they were very, very painful for me. I was really struggling with what was going on. I went home one afternoon from the church office and I just picked up a copy of The Message. You may have read some parts of Eugene Peterson, The Message, which is it's kind of his view of what he thinks the Bible's expressing. It's pretty accurate in most places, but wanders off the track occasionally, but it's not too bad. I had it in my hand and I was sitting at my desk and I was praying quietly to God, saying, look, why is all this happening? Surely there's a solution to this. And he said, I want you to read Luke chapter 6. It was like I heard God speak. Now, I haven't had many experiences in my life like that, but it was so clear in my head. It was, read Luke 6. And I said, I've read Luke 6. And I suddenly realised I was arguing with either what was going on in my head or God. And I thought it was probably God I'm having an argument with. He said, well, read it again. I said, but I know what it says. He said, you haven't read it in the Message. I want you to read it from there. Let me read to you what it said, because I love it. It's underlined in every translation of the Bible I've got now. Blessed are you. It's actually the Luke version of the same story as we've just been talking about. Blessed are you when people hate you. Oh, really? Okay. When they exclude you and insult you. Oh. And reject you as evil. What? Because of me. That was exactly what was going on. Because a group of us had made a stand for something we believed to be right in God's eyes, we were being condemned by some other people in a church. But it happens. The biggest attack on God's people comes from within. We're ready for the attacks from outside. We just don't handle the ones from inside so well. So he said, you're blessed when this happens. It's all cool. Don't worry. And then he went on and said, rejoice. Leap like a lamb if you like. It's all cool. Don't be stressed. But he said, rejoice, because that's exactly how your ancestors treated all of my followers back then. And don't be surprised, because it's how they're going to treat them for the rest of their life on this earth. My people are always going to struggle. Oh, why would you be a follower of Christ? If that's what he promises, all of this hard stuff. But guess what? These 12 boys decided they would join him. He went on a little bit further on, and I won't take the time to go through every part of it, but he went on and he said, boys, when you lose your cool with your brother, you may as well murder him. Now, I'm not suggesting you go and kill him, but losing your cool with him is exactly the same thing. You've killed him in your heart. And then he actually looks them straight in the eye, and this is how I know they're young men, because he says, and when you look after a girl with lust in your eyes, you may as well have committed adultery with her, because it's what's going on in your head that matters. These are young men. He finishes this off after several chapters of talking by telling them that they need to be as perfect as their Father in heaven. Oh yeah, sure, I can do that. Absolutely perfect, boys. That's what I'm looking for. All of this hard stuff and live a life that is faultless. Are you in? Yeah, they say, and high-five him. Right? Fortunately, he says to them, let me tell you something else. My love for you is so deep, is so intense, that I will actually make up the inadequacies that you experience. I will accept this challenge as my own. And I will go this journey with you. Yes, it's what I look for. Yes, it's what I want. But I know how hard it's going to be, and I'm on the journey with you. Are you in? And every one of them doesn't high-five him, but they quietly nod their heads and say, yeah, we're in. We're in. We're in for the long haul. And they were, apart from Judas. Oh, and Peter. Oh, and that's right, Philip. Look, if I go through, I find they all messed up along the way somewhere, some of them more seriously than others, it gets recorded. But every one of them is still in on the journey with Jesus Christ. There's something in there that for me is vitally important. What our young guys are missing in Christianity is the challenge to stand out from the crowd, to be different. We have replaced all of that kind of stuff that's in there with a bunch of rules. We've said, you need to worship God this way, or think about life in this structure, or you have to keep this particular day holy, eat this type of food, don't drink that kind of liquid. You know, we've given a whole bunch of rules and said, these are the rules of transition from boyhood into manhood. Well, I'll tell you what, they're not attractive. That's not at all attractive to a young man. What a young man wants is a challenge like this. I'll give you something if you want in life. I am going to work you hard. I'll work your socks off. I am going to make sure that you really suffer. I am going to drive you to the point where you will mourn, but alongside it, I want you to be meek and humble and quiet and peacemakers. Yeah, guys, here is a huge challenge. Be something no other man is. Be exactly the kind of man I am going to model, because that's where I want to take you. Throw that to a young man in the right words. These aren't the right words for today, I accept that. But the concepts are right. The ideas are right. To take someone to actually stand firm for God, not firm on a bunch of rules and regulations, but firm on a commitment, on principles that guide and drive his life, on things that actually say God matters. These boys struggled at this point to accept this, because there's something really important here. Jesus knew them much better than they knew themselves. And he knew them much better than they yet knew him. As they grew to know him better, they accepted this challenge more successfully. But they never knew him truly for what he was till after his death and resurrection. And that's when they really stepped up. Because just prior to that, when the pressure was on, they deserted. All but John. John didn't. All of them but John deserted. The youngest guy in the team stuck with him through that tough time. He was 20 at that stage. And he stuck through it. The rest of them, they gave up. It's interesting, if you actually look at church history, who was the last disciple to die? And who was the only one not martyred? John. Mind you, he spent a fair bit of time on Patmos, which was not a very comfortable island, in exile. So it was hard, wasn't easy for him, but it's interesting that he is the one that really carried the Christian church through the loss of the other disciples and launched it on its journey through the book of Revelation. That's another story, fantastic book. As you actually look at what John does as he launches them off to survive without the apostles, the old disciples. Some wonderful stuff tucked away in that. But in behind all of this is the fact that these guys never really rose to this challenge until they knew Jesus for who he was. And that's the challenge for every one of us. I don't care whether you're a young man or an old man, a young woman or an old lady or even middle-aged. I don't care where you fit. The same applies to all of us. I can take this and say that all of those things apply to everybody who chooses to be a follower of Jesus Christ. We all have to look at that chapter, read it again, and imagine that we're one of the guys sitting on that rock being challenged to be somebody different to what we are, to stand out in the crowd because of our passion and love for Jesus Christ. Do you know him like that? Do you love him like that? Are you prepared to accept that the gaps in your own experience and life he will make up? And I mustn't finish until I say this. Accepting and following all of that was not a condition for salvation. It was never a condition for salvation. It was the challenge, it was the job description for the boys that would become the apostles. And it's still not a condition for salvation. Salvation is provided by Jesus and Jesus alone. When I know that, I look at this and I say, how can I better represent you on this world, Lord? Because I want to be part of that journey too. And that's the ultimate challenge for every single one of us.